Hello everyone. I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. Story 1. When Mary Beth Nolan moved to the quiet town of Willow's End, she seemed like a breath of fresh air, charming, devout, always baking for church events. Over the years, tragedy followed her. 5 husbands, all dead for what appeared to be freak accidents, drownings, falls of fire, and one mysterious poisoning. Local authorities called her cursed. The community called her heartbroken. But when a rookie insurance adjuster noticed a chilling pattern in her life insurance claims, a hidden past unraveled, one that tied Mary Beth to multiple identities, small towns across 3 states, and an abandoned farmhouse filled with more than just dust. What began as sympathy turned into suspicion, and what was buried beneath her rose garden would finally bring everything to light. Willow's End, Iowa, August 2022. The morning sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Augustine's Church, casting soft hues of blue and crimson on the pews below. Dozens of townspeople had gathered in silence, their heads bowed in reverence or discomfort, as the pastor offered final words for Henry Nolan, a 64-year-old carpenter who had died in what authorities called a tragic and unforeseeable accident. It was the 5th funeral in as many years for Mary Beth Nolan. She stood near the altar, dressed in modest black, face veiled, lips tight. There were no visible tears, but no one dared comment. Whispers filled the air like incense. Such misfortune, one after another. Can't imagine losing 5 husbands. God must be testing her. Others weren't as kind. That woman's curse. 5? Really, there's no way that's normal. Sheriff Don Keene stood near the back, arms crossed, eyes locked on Mary Beth. He was a suspicious man by nature, but there was something about her stillness, her composure, that didn't sit right. 5 husbands, 5 deaths, each ruled an accident, each resulting in a generous insurance payout. Something didn't add up. And it had taken the death of Henry Nolan, the town's own beloved handyman, for the unease to reach critical mass. The stranger in the back. At the edge of the congregation sat a man no one recognized. Younger, crisp gray suit, neatly parted hair. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. But he scribbled in a small leather notebook, eyes flicking from Mary Beth to the coffin, then to the crowd. His name was Elliot Vance, an insurance fraud investigator with Horizon Mutual. He wasn't there out of sympathy. He was there to calculate risk, and he'd seen a lot of red flags. 5 claims, 5 different companies, 1 common beneficiary, Mary Beth Nolan, and the latest claim, Henry's, was still under review. Elliot had quietly flagged a file for a second-level investigation. He needed a reason to delay payout. Now, as the funeral concluded and Mary Beth exited the polite, hushed condolences, Elliot remained in the shadows, watching, waiting, plotting his next move. Mary Beth's story. She came to Willow's End in 2007, alone, said she was a widow, said she needed a fresh start, rented a small farmhouse on the outskirts of town, and married Peter Cray, a retired rail worker, within a year. Locals thought it was sweet, a second chance at love. When Peter fell from a ladder while cleaning out their gutters in 2010, breaking his neck, no one questioned it. The coroner called it a misstep. She buried him in the churchyard and returned to life with quiet dignity. 3 years later, she married John Riggs, a mechanic. In 2015, he died in a house fire. Authorities ruled it electrical. The insurance payout was significant, but not suspicious. Mary Beth had recently taken out a policy on the home and her husband. Then came Alfred Danvers, a shy bookkeeper she met at Bible study. He drowned in his bathtub in 2017. Mary Beth claimed he had seizures, though there was no medical record of such. By the time she married Robert Lang in 2018, people had started to talk. But Robert was tough military, a man of logic. He died from ingesting oleander, a toxic plant found near their garden. Mary Beth claimed he was trying to make tea. Now, in 2022, Henry Nolan was dead. The cause? A freak slip on his own freshly waxed woodshop floor. Blunt force trauma to the head. Again, alone in the house. Again, only Mary Beth present. The quiet house on Meadow Lane. Mary Beth's home sat like a photograph stuck in time. White shutters, hydrangeas lining the path, a faint smell of rose water that seemed ever present. From the outside, it was immaculate. Inside, Elliot Vance would later recall, it felt like walking through a museum curated for grief. Framed photos of smiling couples, doilies, fine china that no one ever used. Wedding portraits hung above the fireplace. 5 of them, different men, same woman, same solemn smile. She doesn't look happy in any of them, Elliot noted to himself. Just ready. As part of his preliminary inquiry, he requested an informal interview, something Horizon Mutual allowed under policy assessment standards. Mary Beth agreed without hesitation. She served tea, chamomile, piping hot. Elliot didn't drink it. The interview. Elliot, I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Nolan. Mary Beth, you're kind to say, but I've learned not to hold on too tightly. The Lord gives and takes. Elliot, I understand Henry was a woodworker. Mary Beth, he loved the craft. Built most of the cabinets in this house. Always said hands were meant for building. Elliot, and the accident? You found him. Mary Beth, yes, he was laying face down in his shop. I called the sheriff, but he was already gone. Elliot, were there any signs he had fallen before? Mary Beth, he was steady, careful, but I suppose God doesn't warn us when our time comes. She smiled faintly. Would you like more tea? Elliot declined. She looked disappointed. The ledger. Later that night, Elliot returned to his motel and began cross-referencing the insurance files. It was subtle, but undeniable. Each of Mary Beth's husbands had signed a new or modified policy within 60 days of their death. Each time, the payout amount increased. In Henry's case, he had 2 policies, one with Horizon Mutual, one with a smaller regional company in Nebraska. Elliot called a contact at the secondary insurer. The rep, a woman named Karen, lowered her voice when she heard the name. She's on our radar too, she whispered. But there's more. What do you mean? We ran her background. The name Mary Beth Nolan didn't exist before 2005. Elliot froze. No prior records? None. Not even a driver's license. That's not possible. Unless it's not her real name. The root of the rose garden. At dawn the next day, Elliot drove past Mary Beth's home again. The dew was thick. The grass glistened. And the roses near the front gate stood in perfect bloom, lush, vibrant, rich red petals. He pulled over, stepped out, and studied the soil. Fresher than the surrounding grass. Dark, rich, recently overturned. He snapped a photo. What Mary Beth didn't know was that Horizon Mutual had already requested a full forensic audit on her property. And if what they suspected was true, those roses weren't fed by mulch and Miracle Grow. They were growing in grave dirt. 5 husbands dead, 1 small town in denial, and a woman with no past, no history. Only a trail of bodies and blossoming flowers that never stopped blooming. But Elliot Vance wasn't done yet, because the deeper he dug into Mary Beth Nolan's history, the more he realized he wasn't the first to suspect her, and the last man who did vanished. August 2022, Cedar County Public Records Office. Elliot Vance knew from experience that small towns often left behind big clues. You just had to dig in the right places and ignore the smiles meant to keep outsiders out. He parked his rental outside the Cedar County Public Records building, a squat beige structure that looked more like a converted laundromat than a government facility. He signed in under the pretense of researching land titles for an upcoming policy audit and was quickly led to the archive room. He didn't care about land. He wanted marriage licenses, death certificates, property transfers. He wanted to know who was Mary Beth Nolan before she was Mary Beth Nolan, a different name. There were no official records of a Mary Beth Nolan prior to 2005, but there was a marriage certificate dated July 1997 for a woman named Cassandra May Hollowell. married to a local logger named Russell Boone in Humboldt County, California. Elliot stared at the photo attached to the license. The woman's face was softer, younger, but the eyes, the posture, the signature slant, it was Mary Beth. He dug deeper. Russell Boone died in 2001. Cause of death, hunting accident. Shot through the neck with a high-caliber rifle. His wife, Cassandra Hollowell, had filed a death report. The case had gone cold. Local authorities ruled it accidental. She disappeared less than a year later. The disappearing trail. Elliot cross-referenced marriage records across 3 states. It was a breadcrumb trail of aliases, near matches, and dead ends. 1992, Bethany Mae Kessler married in Nebraska. Husband drowned in a frozen lake. 1997, Cassandra Hollowell, the logger's wife, shot dead. 2005, Mary Nolan, new name, New Life, Willow's End, Iowa. Each time she moved, each time the husband died. And in one curious case in Nebraska, the insurance claim was flagged by a junior investigator, a man named Lucas Darnell. The file was never completed. The investigator who vanished. Lucas Darnell had worked for Interstate Fidelity, a now-defunct insurance firm absorbed into Horizon Mutual in 2010. Elliot accessed the merged archive and found Darnell's last recorded claim, a policy dispute concerning the death of Michael Kessler. The claim had been closed due to insufficient documentation, but attached was a hand-scrawled note. Spouse profile inconsistent. No verifiable past. Suspect alias use. Consider external investigation. And then, chillingly, meeting claimant Tuesday. Will update after field visit. That update never came. Lucas Darnell was declared missing 2 weeks later. Last known location? Gehring, Nebraska. And the name of the policyholder's spouse? Bethany Kessler. Elliot's quiet alarm. Elliot sat alone in his motel room, staring at his laptop. The pattern was unmistakable now. Mary Beth Nolan was not just a grieving widow. She was a serial identity, a ghost wrapped in wedding veils, moving from man to man, town to town. And each time she left death behind. But what terrified Elliot more than the bodies was what she did to the people who asked too many questions. Darnell, gone. No trace. No investigation. Just a file buried. The widow's game. The next day, Elliot requested an official reassessment hold on Henry Nolan's insurance payout, citing discrepancies in beneficiary data and a pending fraud review. The delay would buy him time, but it also triggered an automated alert to the policyholder, which meant Mary Beth now knew someone was looking deeper. That night, as Elliot returned from dinner, he found something strange outside his motel room, a fresh slice of apple pie, covered in plastic wrap, sitting on his doormat. No note, no room service, no receipt, just a dessert, still warm. His chest tightened. He didn't touch it. A visit to the garden. Early the next morning, Elliot returned to the Nolan residence, this time with a drone camera and a thermal imaging device borrowed from a friend in law enforcement. From the road, it looked like any other charming farmhouse. But from the air, the rose garden told a different story. 6-heat anomalies, human-sized, spaced evenly, aligned in 2 rows, too shallow to be septic tanks, too symmetrical for irrigation. He took screenshots, and then a figure stepped out from under the porch eaves. Mary Beth. She didn't wave, didn't shout. She simply looked up at the drone and smiled. The files that went missing. Later that day, Elliot returned to the Cedar County Records office to dig further into the Cassandra Hollowell alias. The clerk looked confused. "We had a file under that name," she said. "I remember scanning it myself last week. Can I see it?" She checked the system. "That's strange. It's been purged. No digital backup either." "By who?" "Says it was requested by someone from the Department of Insurance." But the request form had no name, no badge number, just a signature in looping cursive. M. Nolan, the map on the mirror. Elliot drove back to his motel. He locked the doors, pulled the curtains, double-checked the deadbolt. Something had shifted. He felt it in his bones. He opened his laptop and traced every known alias of Mary Beth Nolan onto a digital map. The connections formed a spiral, and at the center, a patch of land on the Iowa-Nebraska border, a crumbling farmhouse listed as abandoned since 1986. Elliot froze. The property had never been sold. No taxes paid. No record of demolition. Just coordinates. A void in the system. And according to a newspaper clipping from 1987, that's where her first husband died. There was no doubt now. Mary Beth Nolan wasn't running from her past. She was building on top of it, husband by husband, grave by grave. And whatever lay at the center of that spiral wasn't just a missing file or another body. It was the origin story of a killer hiding in plain sight and someone who had gotten away with it for nearly 40 years. August 2022, Frontier County, Nebraska. The dirt road narrowed as Elliot Vance's rental SUV bounced over gravel and weeds. According to his GPS, he was less than a mile from the coordinates. A forgotten plot of land registered to a Thomas Hollowell. Never sold, never developed, and completely absent from county tax rolls since 1987. The land around him was eerily silent. No homes, no cattle, no birds, just wind and dust. The farmhouse emerged from a haze of summer heat, like a ghost made real, its frame sagging, paint long eroded, roof partially cave-in. Trees twisted around the fence posts like they were trying to pull the house back underground. This was it. The house where Mary Beth Nolan first became a widow. The first husband. The earliest traceable alias for Mary Beth was Cassandra Hollowell, married to Thomas "Tommy" Hollowell, a ranch worker, in 1983. His death was recorded as a fire accident in 1986. But the house? It never burned. There was no sign of scorching. No charred beams. Not even a smoke stain. The coroner's report claimed the body was recovered post-blaze. But now, standing in the remnants of the supposedly destroyed home, Elliot saw the truth. The fire had never happened, which meant the body had been placed, not discovered. The death was staged, fabricated, inside the ruins. Elliot stepped inside. The floor groaned under his weight. Tattered curtains swayed from broken windows. Mice skittered in the walls. And on a mantel above the hearth, somehow untouched by time or thieves, sat a rusted picture frame. Inside it, two people. A young man with a crooked smile, wearing a sheriff's uniform. And beside him, a woman in her 20s, staring straight into the camera with haunting calm. Cassandra, Mary Beth, the eyes hadn't changed. The crawl space. Elliot found a door to the root cellar half buried under a pile of fallen wood. He cleared it carefully and pried it open. The air that came out was stale, dense, metallic. He descended slowly, flashlight in hand. The cellar was narrow, only about 10 feet across, with crumbling stone walls and a dirt floor. But on one side, something caught the beam of his light. A row of scratch names, etched into the stone, barely visible. He crouched, brushed away the grime, and read. Tommy, Peter, John, Alfred, Robert, Henry. All 6 names. 6 husbands. But Tommy's was first. The engraving beneath, it was different. Deeper, almost violent. Someone had dug a final name under Tommy's. Cass. The police report that vanished. Back in his motel, Elliot contacted a retired investigator he trusted, Officer Randall "Randy" Greaves, who'd worked rural Nebraska for 3 decades. Randy picked up after 3 rings. Elliot, do you remember Cassandra Hollowell? Randy? God, that name. Yeah, back in the 80s. Real odd case. Elliot, says a husband died in a fire. Randy, that's what we were told. But the fire never made sense. I was green then, just a beat cop. I remember showing up after the body was already at the coroner's. Elliot, did you see the house? Randy, yeah, no fire damage. None. Elliot, what happened to the report? Randy, disappeared. I know I wrote one. Detailed. Even flagged it for follow-up. A month later, my supervisor said the file was closed internally. Next thing I know, she's vanished. Just left. Sold the land to the county. No forwarding address. A pattern of erasure. Elliot compiled a timeline. 1983. Cassandra marries Thomas. 1986. Thomas dies in fire. No evidence of fire found. Body allegedly cremated. 1987 to 1992. No trace of Cassandra. 1992. Emerges as Bethany Kessler. Another husband dies. 1997. Becomes Cassandra Hollowell again in California. 2005. Rebrands in Iowa as Mary Beth Nolan. 2022. Latest death, Henry Nolan. Each identity spanned roughly 5 to 7 years. Each new life began with a fresh start in a remote town. Each death brought an insurance claim, a funeral, a sympathetic community, and then a disappearance. No one ever investigated. Until now, what she left behind. Elliot returned to the Hollowell property a second time, this time with gloves and a trowel. He began digging in the soft earth beside the house. He didn't know what he was expecting. Bones, maybe a buried weapon. Instead, he found a small lockbox, rusted shut. It took him hours to pry it open. Inside were 6 Polaroids, each of Mary Beth with a different man. Smiling, happy, one torn photo of her as a child, with an older woman, likely her mother. A collection of driver's licenses, all with different names, and a blood-stained wedding ring. On the back of the ring was an engraving. To my Cass, forever starts today. It was Thomas's. She had kept it all these years, not as a memento, but as inventory. The notebook. Beneath the photos was a notebook, leather-bound, weathered, pages brittle. The first page read, "If they ever find this, know that I tried to stop. I truly did. But each time I loved, I saw the end. The moment, the scream, the stillness, and I knew it would come again. I could never outrun the silence that followed." Each entry that followed detailed rituals, not religious, but personal routines. One pattern repeated over and over. Day 45, tea, praise, laughter. Day 46, roses trimmed, letters hidden. Day 47, a still morning, a final breakfast. Day 48, accident. Always day 48, always after 6 weeks. Days the wind swept across the empty fields. Elliot Vance stood at the edge of a truth buried for nearly 4 decades. He wasn't chasing a grieving widow. He was chasing a woman who perfected the act of loving just long enough to destroy. And now that she knew he was coming, he might not make it to day 48. August 2022, Willow's End, Iowa. Elliot Vance was a man built on skepticism. He trusted facts, patterns, paper trails, not intuition or gut feelings. But when he returned to his motel that evening and saw the envelope waiting for him on the bed, placed neatly centered, without any sign of forced entry, his throat tightened. There was no note, just his name in looping cursive, Mr. Vance. Inside was a single sheet of ivory stationery, faintly scented with rosewater. It read, "You walked through my doors, touched my earth, and pried open what was never yours to see. You think I'm hiding, but I've never hidden. I only ever waited for someone smart enough to see the design. If you want the rest of the story, come tomorrow, noon, alone. M. A dangerous invitation." Elliot sat on the edge of the bed, rereading the letter over and over. There were no fingerprints, no return address. But the message was clear. She knew everything. Where he had gone, what he had found, and more disturbingly, how to reach him without detection. It wasn't just that she anticipated his investigation. She controlled it, debating the risk. He phoned Randy Greaves again. "Randy, let me guess. She left you a calling card?" Elliot, more like an invitation. "Randy, Jesus Christ, Elliot, you planning to show up?" Elliot, "If I don't, she disappears." Again. "Randy, or you do." Elliot thought long and hard. He wasn't law enforcement. He had no badge, no legal ground for arrest. Just a theory and a string of buried men no one else had bothered to exhume. "Randy, do yourself a favor, son. Let this one rot." Elliot, it already has. He hung up and decided to go. The garden again. The next day at noon, Elliot stood outside the Nolan residence. Everything looked the same. The picket fence, the manicured lawn, the ever-blooming roses that somehow never wilted. The house exhaled a stillness that felt too deliberate. He knocked once. The door creaked open by itself. No footsteps, no greeting, just a trail of white flower petals leading inward into the spider's parlor. Mary Beth stood in the living room, her silhouette framed against soft sunlight bleeding through lace curtains. She wore a pale lavender dress, hair pinned up, lips untouched by lipstick. The room smelled of cinnamon and dried lilacs. She motioned for him to sit. Mary Beth, tea? Elliot, no. She smiled. Smart man. He sat on the edge of the armchair, posture tense, recorder in his jacket pocket already running. Elliot, why the invitation? Mary Beth, because I want you to understand. Elliot, understand what? That you reinvented yourself more times than most con artists. Mary Beth, not reinvented. Survived. There's a difference. Elliot, 5 husbands. Mary Beth, 7. Elliot, you're admitting it? Mary Beth, would denial comfort you? She turned to the window. You chase statistics. Patterns. I bury men who didn't see the warning signs. Isn't that what your little profession is supposed to stop? Elliot leaned in. Elliot, you're not some feminist fable, Mary Beth. You're a serial killer. Mary Beth, no, I'm an educator. Elliot, of what? She looked him straight in the eyes. Mary Beth, the cause of neglect. Her confession. Mary Beth poured herself tea, chamomile again, and began to speak. Tommy hit me for the first time 6 months after our vows. Said it was stress. Said he was sorry. It became routine. Just like dinner. Just like silence. The others were more subtle. Peter drank. John gambled. Alfred made me feel invisible. Robert kept his affairs out of town. Henry? He was different. Kind. Thoughtful. I almost didn't go through with it. Elliot stared. Elliot, so why did you? Mary Beth's eyes filled with something that wasn't quite sadness. Because it never lasts. Because men don't stay kind. Not in real life. She pulled out a small notebook. Worn leather. Just like the one Elliot had found on the farmhouse floorboards. Inside were names. Dates. Days marked with symbols. He noticed a fresh line. The last one written. Elliot Vance, day 16. The warning. Elliot, what's day 48? She froze, then smiled. The end of the lesson. He stood abruptly, heart racing. Elliot, you're planning something. Mary Beth, always. He pulled out his phone. She didn't flinch. Elliot, I recorded everything. The aliases, the confessions, your pattern. If I disappear. Mary Beth, then your story becomes mine. She stood, walked over, and placed a hand on his shoulder. But I think you're too smart for that. Aren't you, Mr. Vance? Exit strategy. Elliot walked out with the notebook clutched in one hand. The audio recording uploaded automatically to the cloud. He didn't look back. But the words echoed in his head long after the front door closed. You're on day 16. That night, his motel lights flickered. A car idled outside his window for 7 full minutes. No one knocked, but someone left a single rose on the hood of his car. Blood red, thorns still sharp. Mary Beth Nolan had revealed herself, but not to confess, only to warn. Elliot had 32 days to live, unless he could find concrete proof. Fast. Because now it wasn't just a case. It was a countdown. And Mary Beth? She'd already written the ending. August 2022, Omaha, Nebraska. 3 days had passed since Elliot Vance's unsettling meeting with Mary Beth Nolan. He'd read her notebook from cover to cover, flipping to the names, dates, and emotionally sterile observations as if he were reading a weather journal. Just cold predictions of incoming death. He hadn't slept much. Every creak in his motel room, every passing car, every knock on the wall next door had him reaching for the knife he kept under the pillow. Day 19. 29 days to day 48. He had to move fast. The next step wasn't Mary Beth's marriages. It was her origin. Who was she before Cassandra Hollowell? Before the wedding dresses and false names? To get that, he needed records the government no longer held. So he found someone who might. The therapist who quit. Dr. Eleanor Hadley was a former criminal psychiatrist who had worked in Nebraska's Department of Correctional Behavioral Services in the 1980s. She retired after a brief scandal involving the loss of a patient file tied to a suspicious suicide. Elliot tracked her down to a suburban bungalow in Omaha. She was in her 70s now, quiet, bitter, and sharp as a razor. At first, she refused to speak. Then he showed her a picture of young Cassandra Hollowell. She paled. Dr. Hadley, she was 16, a ward of the state, came through the system after her mother hung herself in the barn. Elliot, her name was Cassandra then. Dr. Hadley, her real name was Samantha Eloise McKinney. Cassandra was her adoption name, picked it herself. Elliot, so the aliases started before adulthood. Dr. Hadley, they started the night her stepfather came into her room drunk and didn't leave until morning. Elliot swallowed hard. The first death. Samantha's juvenile records were sealed, but Dr. Hadley remembered what wasn't in the files. Her stepfather died in a fire. The same night her mother was found hanging in the barn. Official cause, faulty gas line. But there was no gas line, just a sealed report, a missing caseworker, and a young girl who smiled at the flames. Hadley had pushed for psychological evaluation and trauma recovery, but Samantha didn't respond to treatment. She didn't lash out, didn't cry. She only asked one thing. Do bad people get to die quietly? The unrecorded years. Elliot spent the next 48 hours tracing every thread of Samantha Eloise McKinney's life. She was shuffled between 7 foster homes between 1984 and 1987. Every placement ended in sudden withdrawal. One foster family reported that their son went missing for 2 days after calling her names. He was later found in the attic, tied up, scared out his mind, but unharmed. When questioned, Samantha told the caseworker, "I wanted him to feel what I felt." After aging out of the system at 18, she vanished, reappearing in Humboldt County as Cassandra Hollowell, married to Thomas within a year, and thus began the pattern. Every name, every identity, every husband, each one a clean slate, until they disappointed her. Then came day 48, the mind behind the method. Elliot returned to his notes. Every husband had died after roughly 6 weeks of marriage. Not all abusive, not all cruel, but all, in some way, had failed to match the image she had created in her head. Elliot's theory deepened. Mary Beth Samantha wasn't simply a killer. She was performing a ritual, an emotional reenactment of her childhood trauma. She built an illusion of love, a life, a routine, and the moment the illusion broke, even slightly, it triggered the purge, a pattern of controlled grief, engineered trauma. She wasn't killing for money or revenge. She was resetting, over and over, a message in the mirror. Back at his motel, Elliot discovered something he hadn't noticed earlier, written in the condensation on his bathroom mirror. Day 21. His heart seized. He hadn't used the bathroom since early morning. The mirror had cleared hours ago. Someone had been inside. He checked his recorder, his laptop, even his luggage, all untouched. The message was all she needed to leave. He was now 3 weeks into his encounter with Mary Beth, and she was keeping count. The silent call. That night, his phone rang once. Unlisted number. One ring. Then it stopped. He checked voicemail. None. But the screen still showed the last call Idaho. Unknown. He tried to dial it back. Disconnected. Seconds later, a new message appeared. An image. No text. Just a picture of him sitting on the motel bed, reading the notebook, taken through the window, taken from inside the room, going public. Elliot had resisted going to the authorities. There was no hard proof yet. No bodies exhumed. No warrants issued. But now she was escalating. He needed backup. He contacted Sheriff Don Keene in Willow's End and shared everything. Names, files, audio, timelines. Keene was silent for a long moment. Sheriff Keene, she's going to kill you. Elliot, not if we move fast. Keene, we'll need a judge to sign a search warrant. Elliot, then let's give him a reason. Elliot submitted his full report to Horizon Mutual and filed a formal fraud and homicide alert to the state office. It triggered an automatic escalation to the Attorney General's office. And now, finally, someone was listening. But they would need more. They would need evidence of murder. And Elliot would need to survive long enough to get it. As the clock ticked toward day 22, Elliot Vance realized the next steps would not just be risky, they would be personal. Mary Beth had invited him into her web. Now she was tightening the strands. August 2022, Willow's End, Iowa. The small convoy rolled up to the Nolan residence just after dawn. Sheriff Don Keene led the way, followed by a team of forensic techs, 2 deputies, and Elliot Vance in the back of an unmarked SUV. The search warrant had come through at 4:17 a.m., signed by Judge Hawthorne in nearby Jasper County. The charge: suspicion of insurance fraud, identity falsification, and homicide. Officially, they were there to investigate inconsistencies in the death of Henry Nolan. Unofficially, they were about to dig up Mary Beth Nolan's garden. The house on guard. Mary Beth watched from the porch as the vehicles pulled in. She wore a white blouse, linen pants, barefoot on the painted steps. Not a flicker of surprise crossed her face, only a faint smirk. Sheriff Keene, Mrs. Nolan, we have a warrant to search your property. She nodded politely. You'll need gloves. The soil's stubborn. Her calm unnerved everyone. Most suspects raged, pleaded, or fled. Mary Beth? She brewed coffee. The garden that shouldn't grow. The team began with the rose garden, 12 bushes in total, evenly spaced along the rear fence. Elliot had provided satellite images showing thermal anomalies, heat signatures where the ground retained warmth differently than the rest of the yard. 6 anomalies, 6 suspected graves. The soil was unusually rich, dark, moist, and loose, like it had been recently tended. A tech knelt down with a trowel and began to scrape. In less than 5 minutes, the tip of a decomposing shoe broke the surface. Tech, we got something. Keene called for cadaver dogs. The dogs didn't hesitate. They hit on all 6 locations, names and bones. By noon, the first body had been unearthed. Male, adult, wearing a wedding band. The initial guess, Henry Nolan. But when the second body came up, so did the confusion. This one was older, with heel bone fractures and dental work not matching Henry's records. By sunset, 4 male corpses and 2 sets of partial remains had been discovered, each in a separate, shallow grave, each wrapped in linen sheets, precisely folded, each grave marked by a rose bush, blooming in defiance of the death beneath. A forensic anthropologist on site made the first chilling observation. These burials spanned decades. The Book of the Dead. Inside the house, Keene and Elliot searched the den. They found a locked trunk beneath the window seat. When pried open, it revealed 6 Polaroid albums, each labeled with initials, a folded insurance policy for each husband, marriage licenses in 5 different states, passports under aliases, Cassandra Hollowell, Bethany Kessler, Margaret Duell, Nadine Flowers, a velvet pouch containing rings, wedding bands, each with initials engraved. It was a ledger of lives claimed, filed with meticulous order. At the bottom of the trunk was a composition notebook. Like the others Elliot had seen, this one was titled The Garden. Inside were handwritten entries, tracking her plantings. Henry, day 48, bled easily. Still loved me. Left a note. Robert, day 49, suspected. Cried. Too late. John, day 46. Gambling was the excuse. Didn't need one. Tommy, day 48. First bloom. Fire didn't work. Peter, day 47. Asked the wrong question. Smiled when I said yes. Alfred, day 45. Too quiet. I made it loud. Elliot stopped reading. It wasn't a garden. It was a graveyard of rituals. A public shock. By nightfall, local news outlets had swarmed the Nolan property. Helicopters circled overhead. Reporters whispered phrases like Black Widow, rural serial killer, and the Rose Garden murders. Sheriff Keene made a brief statement. We are conducting an ongoing investigation into multiple suspicious deaths tied to this residence. The homeowner, Mary Beth Nolan, is cooperating at this time. She was too much so. She answered every question, corrected paperwork, even offered the names of the men buried in the yard, though she claimed ignorance on how they got there. Isn't it strange, she said, how men tend to disappear on their own? Elliot's unease. Back at the sheriff's office, Elliot reviewed the evidence. It was overwhelming. Physical remains, paper trails, recorded conversations, handwritten confessions. But still, something didn't feel finished. 6 graves, 6 men. But in the early thermal images, there had been 7 anomalies. One was missing, and the 7th body wasn't in the garden. It was somewhere else. A new clue. Mary Beth had been booked for questioning. As she was escorted into holding, she turned to Elliot and whispered, "You forgot one." He stared. "Mary Beth, the first one, the only one I buried for love." "Elliot, Tommy?" She shook her head, slowly. Earlier, under the oak tree, the hidden grave, Elliot and Keene returned to property just before midnight. Only one tree stood on the land outside the fenced garden. A gnarled oak, long dead, its bark splitting like dried bone. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed a cavity beneath the roots. They began digging. It didn't take long. Inside was a child-sized skeleton, wrapped in a deteriorated quilt. No ID, no photos, no documentation, just a pendant clutched in the tiny hand. A pendant that matched the one in Mary Beth's childhood photo, the one she wore as a young girl named Samantha. The final grave had been found, but it wasn't a husband. It was her brother, the one the state had no record of, the one her stepfather claimed had run off, the one she had loved before the trauma began. She hadn't just buried victims. She buried her past. And now it was all unearthed. October 2022, Frontier County Courthouse, Nebraska. The courtroom was packed. News vans lined the street outside. Reporters elbowed for space along the gallery benches. America wanted to see the woman behind the roses, the widow who buried her husbands with a smile and a trowel. Mary Beth Nolan, born Samantha Eloise McKinney, entered with the calm grace of someone who just won a raffle, not someone facing 6 counts of first-degree murder, fraud, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. She wore soft blue, no handcuffs, and a faint smile. Her defense? She didn't kill anyone. The legal chess game. The prosecution laid out its case like a surgical dissection. 6 bodies found buried on her property. Marriage records tying her to everyone. Insurance claims paid out to her after each death. Journals that documented the men's final days in chilling detail. Aliases and forged documents going back over 30 years. And most damning of all, her own recorded confession to Elliot Vance. But the defense had a different story. My client is a victim of systemic abuse, male violence, and state failure. These men were dangerous. She was isolated. She had no one to turn to. They argued the notebooks were trauma journals, not murder logs. They argued the insurance money was compensation, not motive. They even argued Elliot Vance had coerced her statements. A journalist, not a cop, no Miranda warning, no counsel. A nation divided. The public was split. Some saw her as a cold-blooded killer who manipulated towns, men, and law enforcement with terrifying precision. Others viewed her as a feminist folk legend, a woman who refused to be a victim, who took justice into her own hands. On TikTok, she trended as #WidowQueen. On Reddit, entire threads argued over the ethics of trauma revenge. But for Elliot, this wasn't about ideology. It was about truth and survival, because Mary Beth had one more card to play, the cross-examination. When Elliot was called to the stand, he expected pressure, but he didn't expect what came next. Mary Beth's lawyer produced a sealed envelope. Inside, photos of Elliot at Mary Beth's house before the official investigation began. Another set. Elliot near the grave sites with shovel in hand. Were you digging without a warrant, Mr. Vance? Did you trespass? Did you alter the scene before police arrived? He answered truthfully, yes, yes, yes. The courtroom murmured. The defense leaned into it. So, how can we trust the integrity of any evidence tied to these graves? The widow takes a stand. On day 12 of the trial, Mary Beth testified. She spoke clearly, calmly, and with striking composure. Each man hurt me, not all with fists, some with silence, some with shame. I stayed because I thought love could fix broken things. When it couldn't, I left. But I didn't kill them. She smiled slightly. Men destroy themselves. All I ever did was plant roses where they fell. When asked about the journal entries, she claimed they were symbolic. Day 48 was the end of hope, not life. When asked about the graves, I woke up and they were gone. Maybe someone followed me. Maybe someone hated them more than I did. The courtroom went silent. She had introduced reasonable doubt. And now it was the jury's burden. The jury decides. The deliberation took 5 days. Each charge was considered individually. First-degree murder, X6. Insurance fraud, X6. Forgery. Obstruction. Abuse of a corpse. When the verdict were read aloud, the country held its breath. Guilty on insurance fraud, forgery, and obstruction. Not guilty on all 6 murder charges. The courtroom erupted. Shock, rage, applause, tears. Mary Beth closed her eyes, not in relief, in satisfaction. Sentencing. Judge Hawthorne gave her 25 years for financial crimes and obstruction, citing gross manipulation of the system and deep moral depravity. But with good behavior, she'd be out in 12. She winked at Elliot as she was led away. That's less time than I spent waiting for a good man. Elliot's reckoning. In the days that followed, Elliot was both hailed and condemned. Some said he broke the case. Others claimed his ethics compromised it. His podcast series, Roses for the Dead, skyrocketed to over 10 million downloads. But Elliot didn't feel like a winner, because on the day after sentencing, a package arrived at his apartment. No return address. Inside, a blank notebook, and a note. Day 1, a new garden begins. Mary Beth Nolan was behind bars, but her myth had already taken root. Elliot wasn't sure if justice had won, or if it had just been outmaneuvered. December 2022, Sweetwater, Texas. The sun had barely risen when Sheriff Dale Whitaker of Nolan County got the call. A ranch hand, out clearing brush, had stumbled upon something strange beneath a blooming rose bush in December. Roses shouldn't be alive in that part of Texas during a freeze. But this one, bright red, perfect petals. What lay underneath was worse. A man's body, wrapped in linen, face down, shallow grave, a wedding ring still on his finger, etched on the inside. M.N. Sheriff Whitaker stared at the engraving. Ah, hell, he muttered. Not again. A familiar signature. The FBI was alerted within hours. An agent from Dallas was already halfway through her report when she flagged the case up the chain. The burial method, the linen wrap, the rose, and that ring matches the Nolan case. But she's in custody. A phone call was placed to Elliot Vance, the reluctant expert. Elliot was in Chicago, trying to get his life back. He'd turned down multiple interviews, declined book deals, closed his podcast comment section after waves of disturbing fan messages started rolling in. One woman had written, "She didn't kill them. She set them free. I want to be her rose." But when the call came in from the FBI, Elliot couldn't look away. A murder in Texas. Same pattern. Same burial. Same initials. M.N. It had to be a copycat. Unless the possibility no one wanted. Elliot's mind spun. Was this someone trying to honor Mary Beth? Or worse, someone she groomed? He remembered her final words at sentencing. That's less time than I spent waiting for a good man. And the notebook she sent to his apartment. Blank, except for one line. Day 1, a new garden begins. He hadn't thought she meant someone else would plant it. The victim. The Texas body was identified quickly. Eric Waller, 36, divorced, electrician, no children. He had gone missing 2 weeks earlier after meeting a woman through a dating site, according to his sister. He'd been gushing about her, said she was old-fashioned, said she brought him lunch at work, said she had the softest voice. Her name, he said, was Natalie Monroe. The initials, NM, but in reverse, MN. The hunt begins. The FBI tracked the dating profile. Fake photos, VPNs, prepaid phone numbers. All signs of a careful, calculated operator. Whoever Natalie Monroe was, she'd studied Mary Beth Nolan's playbook perfectly. A rose bush was purchased from a small nursery in Abilene. A rare, hybrid tea rose that bloomed even in early winter. Paid in cash. Delivered to a post office box. The P.O. box was registered under another false name, Beth K. Hollowell, a combination of Bethany Kessler and Cassandra Hollowell, two of Mary Beth's known aliases. This wasn't a coincidence. This was devotion. Mary Beth's silence. The FBI paid a visit to the Nebraska Correctional Center for women. Mary Beth was brought into the visitor's room, hands folded, hair neatly tied back. She wore a subtle smirk the moment they mentioned Texas. Agent, you inspired someone. Mary Beth, everyone wants to be loved. Sometimes they just need a guide. Agent, do you know her? Mary Beth, who says it's a her? Agent, she used your aliases. Mary Beth leaned in. You're assuming I started something. Maybe I just showed people what was already inside them. The cult of the widow. Elliot dove into forums, blogs, message boards. He found them, dozens of online groups dedicated to Mary Beth, many private, some dark. They referred to her as the Bloom, the final wife, and St. Cass. Users posted messages like, I'm on day 18. He doesn't even know. She taught us how to see the end before it begins. I bought the shears today. There were even how-to guides, burial layouts, journal formats, how to prepare the garden. It wasn't just one copycat. It was a movement. Elliot's breaking point. He stared at his screen in horror. This wasn't just a story anymore. Mary Beth hadn't just killed 6 men. She planted an idea, and now others were harvesting it. He called Sheriff Keene. Elliot, we're not done. She's not done. Keene, she's locked up. Elliot, her body is. Her influence isn't. Elliot submitted everything he found to the FBI, but as he was closing his laptop, a message popped up in his inbox. No sender, no subject, just one sentence. You're on day 34. The nightmare was spreading. Mary Beth Nolan might be in prison, but her legacy had escaped the garden. January 2023, Quantico, Virginia, at a secure FBI task force meeting dubbed Operation Widow's Web. Agents pinned a map of the United States to the wall. Red dots were spreading across it like a slow disease. 5 murders, 5 states, all in the last 30 days. Each case bore the same eerie hallmarks. Victim, recently married or in a romantic relationship. Cause of death, undetermined, but likely asphyxiation or poisoning. Burial, shallow grave beneath a blooming rose bush. Signature, wedding band engraved with initials, all variant of MN or other known Nolan aliases. These weren't coincidences. They were replications. Mary Beth's blueprint. Elliot Vance sat at the edge of the conference table, reviewing photos. Victims from Arkansas, Oregon, Maine, Florida, and Utah. Each garden was different, but the message was unmistakable. He flipped through a notebook the FBI had seized from a suspect in Portland. On the last page, I watched her trial. I listened to her every night. She showed me the way. I will bloom where I bury. These weren't random acts of violence. These were disciples, and they called themselves the gardeners. The cult mentality. An undercover FBI profiler infiltrated one of the invite-only chat rooms. Within a week, she was invited to an encrypted Zoom call. 27 people, faces obscured, voices modulated. They read from a document called the Blooming Book. Rules, Rituals, phases, a disturbingly structured doctrine built around Mary Beth Nolan philosophies. Day 1 to 12, emotional investment. Day 13 to 20, quiet obedience. Day 21 to 40, observation. Day 41 to 48, separation from illusion. Day 49, planting day. It wasn't about murder to them. It was ascension. The woman in the mirror. Back in Nebraska Correctional Center, Mary Beth received mail daily, more than any other inmate. Letters, artwork, roses wrapped in pages torn from the bell jar, wedding rings, sometimes keys. Prison staff began intercepting contraband, but something more insidious was slipping through. Questions. Am I on day 37? Do I need poison, or is silence enough? Will he deserve it? Mary Beth answered none of them, but she read every one, and smiled. The broken connection. Elliot attempted to visit Mary Beth again, this time under FBI escort. She declined the meeting, sent a note instead. I already told you the story, Elliot. You're just catching up. The garden doesn't need me anymore. It knows how to grow. That night, Elliot found a single rose on his pillow in the hotel. Real, fresh. No one had entered his room. Pattern of the gardeners. A disturbing pattern emerged among the victims. All had histories of emotional or financial manipulation. None had violent criminal records. All had partners described by friends as charming, intense, and overly romantic in beginning. The killers? Mostly women, but also 2 men. Elliot's theory proved correct. Mary Beth hadn't passed on her trauma. She'd passed on her template. Some gardeners were survivors. Some were predators. All believed they were correcting wrongs. And society, it didn't know who to blame. When justice fractures, cable news exploded. Copycat killer cult spreads across U.S. Mary Beth Nolan's influence reaches new generation of vigilantes. Are we creating killers by celebrating trauma? Debates raged. Was Mary Beth Nolan responsible for their actions? Or had the justice system's failure to convict her on murder charges simply invited more? Petitions arose to retry her. Some argued she should be put in solitary confinement indefinitely, but others defended her. The online movement, calling themselves the Bloomed, now numbered in the thousands. Elliot's descent. Elliot Vance hadn't slept in days. He kept a pistol on his nightstand. He no longer dated, no longer answered unknown numbers. He felt like he'd become part of the web. Worse, he'd helped spin it. You gave her a platform. You made her a legend. He tried to walk away. But on January 27th, the 6th body was found, this time in Illinois, less than 40 miles from where Elliot lived. The name of the victim, Matthew Nolan Vance. His younger cousin. Elliot dropped the phone when he heard. He hadn't seen Matt in years. But the killer had chosen the name deliberately. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. The gardeners weren't hiding anymore. They were evolving. And now, they were turning their attention to the man who exposed their queen. February 2023, Chicago, Illinois. Elliot Vance stood at the edge of a grave he hadn't dug. His cousin, Matthew Nolan Vance, was being lowered into the earth. No press, no cameras, just a priest, 2 weeping family members, and a body buried beneath the chill of February frost. A rose lay atop the casket. Deep red, perfect, unseasonal. He stared at it until his knuckles turned white on the umbrella handle. This was no longer about journalism. It was personal, and the gardeners had made one thing clear. He wasn't a reporter anymore. He was the next Bloom, tracing the route. The FBI launched a targeted operation, Project Final Bloom. 5 months of investigation, leads, undercover agents, and cyber forensics had all pointed toward a singular figure emerging among the gardeners, a woman known only as Lilith. She didn't hide behind Mary Beth's name. She surpassed it. Lilith preached that love was a lie that chained women, and that planting the illusion set them free. She wasn't just quoting Mary Beth. She was weaponizing her. The true believer. After weeks of digging, they found her real name, Nora Delaney, age 29, former social worker, Dismissed for ethical misconduct in 2020, Nora had been present at Mary Beth Nolan's trial. Sat 2 rows from the back every day. She'd written to Mary Beth in prison over 100 times. And while Mary Beth never responded officially, her prison log showed unauthorized visits, logged under fake IDs. One believed to be Nora herself. It's where she received the Garden Journal, the original unredacted version Elliot had never seen. And now, Nora wasn't just mimicking the crimes. She was coordinating them. The final note. Elliot returned home after the funeral and found his door unlocked. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was out of place, except one item. On his kitchen table, a terracotta pot, fresh soil, a blooming rose. Inside the petals, tucked like a love letter, was a folded scrap of paper. Day 47. Preparing for the end. Elliot didn't call the police. He packed. He moved to a secure location with full-time FBI surveillance. But even there, he felt exposed. It wasn't just paranoia. They were still out there. And the message was clear. He had 1 day left, unless he ended it himself. Playing the bait, Elliot proposed a risky plan to the task force. Let him go off-grid, post a farewell episode to his podcast, announce he's leaving town for good, make himself the ultimate bait. The FBI initially resisted. Too dangerous. Too unpredictable. But Elliot insisted. You don't catch a spider by chasing it. You wait in its web. The trap. On day 48. Elliot checked into an old roadside motel in Rock Island, Illinois. Alone. No FBI presence visible. Just a single room. A recorder. A backup camera. And a single rose bush and a planter outside the window. At 2:19 a.m., the door creaked open. A figure entered. Calm, dressed in black. Gloves. No mask. She approached quietly. Nora Delaney. Nora, you're not afraid? Elliot, only of being wrong. She pulled a syringe from her coat. Nora, you should have stopped digging. Elliot, and you should have planted your lies deeper. That's when the lights flashed. Doors burst open. FBI agents swarmed in. Nora didn't fight. She just smiled. It's okay. Another will bloom. Mary Beth's final word. News of Nora's arrest spread fast. She faced multiple murder charges, conspiracy, and attempted homicide. But in the aftermath, Elliot received a final letter. From Mary Beth Nolan herself. Scrawled in red ink. Every garden needs a caretaker. You became mine. I never needed to kill again. I just needed someone to tell the story well. You made me immortal. Elliot Vance no longer records podcasts. He lives under a new name, in a new state, far from anything with a rose bush. But sometimes, when he walks past a garden center or florist shop, he catches the faintest scent of blooming petals. He doesn't stop. He doesn't look, because he knows somewhere, someone still believes in the widow's web. And he'll always wonder, is it really over?